Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now we are reviewing The Bear Season 2, and today we are on Episode 3 titled Sundae. If you haven't watched it yet, this is your spoiler alert. Please check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. All right. Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for Episode 3.
When Sydney finds herself having to think about the Bear's menu, she decides to take a big tour of Chicago, and by visiting a wide variety of restaurants, she desperately searches for inspiration.
All right. Let's start off with our episode titles of choice for Episode 3. Sarah, what is yours?
Mine is Fun.
Oh, I love that. Yes. We do a whole word study in this episode at the beginning.
Yeah.
My episode title is No Other Shoe.
Yep.
All right. So let's dive into our thoughts about Episode 3. We're chugging along on our journey through Season 2. Sarah, what were your thoughts about this episode?
Yeah, I think this episode in particular does a great job of setting those stakes and providing even more kind of warning signs for us. You know, there's a lot of red flags up till this point in the show, and we've seen the way that the partnership with Sid and Carmy and kind of Sugar is forming, and how Carmy, you know, just promises that he can pay back Uncle Jimmy in 18 months without actually running any numbers. So things like that. And you know how impossible this task is. And I feel like this episode is a great way to encapsulate all of those fears and all of that stress and that tension in this one episode and really help up the stakes for what they're doing even more, while also continuing to deepen some of these other character moments. You know, we're seeing how Carmy and Sydney are working together and how their partnership is actually working out. And then we also see these other moments with these other characters that continue to push their stories forward. But I think that this is such a pivotal episode in helping us see what's going on with this partnership and what are the stakes for this restaurant, and what is the likelihood of them actually being able to pull it off.
Yeah, they throw in a whole COVID-19 with all of the restaurants closing, like a literal montage at the beginning, which I don't know what time period or specific year I thought that this was in, but I thought that was just such a fascinating way to, one, the show's been so elegantly intentional about including those like larger macro themes around gentrification and small businesses and things like that throughout in Season 1 in the most subtle and delicate of ways. It's been able to weave those in, and it was cool to see the way that they weave that into this as well, just how hard it is for especially small businesses to survive under those economic conditions. But yeah, let's add some more things to the stakes, shall we? Just the climate that they're opening in. And I thought that the way that was cut and edited was also really fabulous. This is one of my favorite Sydney episodes. I loved feeling like we were getting to spend some time inside of her brain and her creative process. And I feel like you just see so much of her grit and tenacity and commitment for this craft and for making this a success. And even when her partner and her teammates are kind of bailing on her, she's still so faithfully doing all of the research to find the best inspiration that she can. And I think it's cool to see her creative process and the way that the show cuts some of that together, and some of those like visual moments I thought was so neat and so cool. She also doesn't take Carmy's BS, you know, like she consistently stands up for what she believes in and what she believes is healthy and true. And the way that she's able to communicate, I think, is we're seeing her grow in, and we get to see some of those moments in this episode as well. So, so many great Sydney moments, but also once again, the show is really great at seed planting. So I just feel like there's a ton of seed planting that we get with Marcus's storyline, Richie, and some of his personal growth that he's going through, this whole new relationship with Carmi and Claire. Uh, there's a lot there that we just get little snippets of, but the show doesn't give us everything and indulge in it. Like I want it to. I just want more, and so I just have to keep waiting for the next one. So I was surprised at how slowly we are developing some of those because we're focusing on Sydney for this one, and the show's just really good at building the anticipation.
Yeah, and it gives you little glimpses into these other things, and we're still making progress on these other fronts, but it's so great that we could just get to spend this whole episode primarily with Sydney and her, tasting tour of Chicago. Uh and it's just so fun to spend time with her. She's such a dynamic character, and we've learned a lot about her. And then this is just peeling back those layers. And I really appreciate, because like I'm not a foodie. I have a terrible palate. I can't tell you what is good food versus what is bad food. But
Uh-huh.
I love that, because like it had never occurred to me, like the process for like creating a dish or curating a menu. Like that just had never crossed my mind before. And so I love that this episode in particular is taking us into that process, and you see her creativity and you see her research, and you see how the creation of this dish is tied to Chicago itself, but it's also tied to her. And I loved those visual montages as she's mentally putting the dish together and imagining what could the plating look like, and what what does the plate look like, what does the dish look like, what is the shape of the pasta, like all of these details. But it's also intercut with like architecture and geometric prints. But then we also see those images of her and her mom, so this is also a very personal dish for her too. And so it's just cool that it's visually able to tell you how much this dish means to her and is part of her in a really efficient amount of time. And I'm so impressed at its ability to do that. And it does it really, really well in this episode.
Yes, I loved the way that those montages like build on each other as well. Like at the beginning, she's focused solely on the different shapes of the pasta, and there's all these different shots and of the different shapes that she could be exploring with in her mind. And then later on, it builds on the color and the sauce and the way that the plating is constructed. I mean, it truly is like a work of art, and you see the way that she is expanding to draw inspiration from the architecture of the city and the things around her. Like she's truly an artist, and I think sometimes like people can scoff at the like fine dining culinary world, but I feel like this show and this episode specifically showcases how much of it is an art, down to the colors that are used and the artistic construction of the plating itself, in addition to the taste. And I thought that was just like such a cool way to show how that those phases also built throughout the episode. I mean, honestly, the dish gets a whole narrative arc in and of itself, from the initial shapes to the colors and the sauces that are used to the way that they are plated and constructed. Um, all of that gets a whole like three stages of getting built out inside of Sydney's brain.
And I love that the inspiration wasn't just in fine dining locations. She went all over the place and tried such a wide variety of foods as inspiration. And I think that that's a really beautiful example of how inspiration comes. I'm not just in cooking, but in any kind of creative medium. You don't know where you're going to find inspiration. So if you're looking for inspiration, cast a really wide net. And that's what we see her doing here. And so it's just cool that the show is highlighting so many different styles of food, and it's actually introducing us to different chefs and restaurateurs who are in Chicago, which is also super cool. So just the intentionality in this episode and the restaurants that she goes to is so fun.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, diverse cuisines, from the east to the west, and then also diversity in like the price points of them. She goes from like the neighborhood pizza shop all the way up to these like fancy smancy things and everything in between. Just really, really cool. And I the other thing that I loved about that whole sequence of her exploring the restaurants in Chicago is like seeing the like mutual respect and camaraderie that she had and the rapport and the relationships that she's built with some of these restaurant owners or some of the chefs, which is also really neat. Like she's really well connected, and I loved seeing them kind of just like dive into and share advice with each other and insight with each other, like all of that warmed my little heart. Just the community that's built around this shared love of this craft that they have together. I thought that was really, really cool.
And what a good reminder that like Sid knows what she's doing and she is kind of like a hot commodity. That one chef is like, "Hey, if this doesn't work out, like come work with me." So just that reminder that Sydney is choosing this. She's not some kid who's just trying this for the first time, but she is a a pretty like well-known chef, maybe not as well-known as Carmi, but she is well-known in her own right, and she is wanted, and her skills are known in the community too. And I think that that's also a really important reminder as we're watching her and Carmi continue their partnership and continue to build this restaurant together, is that she knows what's up.
Yeah, that's so true. It can easily be like a very clear power dynamic between her and Carmi, who has clearly received that acclaim and whatnot, but she is just kind of working under him, and it's like, no, they are truly partners in this. Um, so one of the other things that that whole montage sequence does and plants seeds and kind of increases the stakes around is all of the accounts of these chefs and restaurant owners of bad experiences they've had with business partners that really didn't work out. They either got screwed over, or got the short end of the stick in some way, or there's a lack of trust. And I feel like that was such an efficient way to plant the seeds, and it's a great backdrop to kind of the budding tensions and doubts or questions perhaps that Sydney has around her working relationship with Carmi. And I think it all comes to fruition in that ending sequence where Carmi essentially has made this big decision without consulting her or even letting her know at all. And so just the way that the show is priming us for that and then gives us a moment to really see that actually happen between her and her partner, I think was really, really fascinating. And the other really great thing about that is that those seeds were planted back like episode 1 and 2 with Carmi in the negotiation conversation with Uncle Jimmy, just making decisions, throwing out numbers without consulting any of his business partners. And so that seed is continuing to be watered and continuing to grow in kind of Carmi's decision making style or his partnership style. And I feel like even though they kind of have an initial conversation about it in the moment, you can tell that there's still a lot more stuff to get worked out between the two of them and their working relationship.
Yeah, it's not all smooth sailing right now, which also in a way makes sense. Like they're doing this impossible thing on this impossible timetable. Everyone's stressed and nobody is at their best right now. And so then you see the way that they both are handling that stress very differently. And Carmi's communication goes down the drain. And so we can see that these problems aren't going away, but they're going to persist. So, are these two going to be able to work through that and make their partnership stronger? Or is this restaurant really going to be the end of them? So, is this season going to end in a victory or a tragedy? And we aren't sure right now.
Yeah, and they really haven't known each other for that long as well. So just the time needed to build that trust and to work through these like tough conversations is important in any type of like relationship, friendship, working relationship of any kind. So it's fascinating to see how by putting them so close in vicinity with each other and having to work on this big thing together, I feel like we'll get to see a lot of their character traits come out and opportunities for them to grow or to regress. Like we'll get to see all of that because it's easy to be chilling and doing your own thing on your own, but the minute you have to like brush up against somebody else and collide with them and figure out your working styles and your strengths and weaknesses and tendencies, a lot of stuff comes out, and it either makes you stronger and you build trust because you're like we figure these things out together, or it can be a little detrimental to your relationship if it's not handled well. And so each of these moments of tension are opportunities for them to grow and get stronger. And what's really cool is that we've seen them work through so many tough conversations and difficult moments together in season one. And so we're rooting for them. They've showed us that they can do it. And as the stakes get higher, there's more stress, there's more tension, all that kind of stuff. So they're fighting bigger bosses, in this video game of accomplishing this mission that they're on together. They're leveling up and tackling bigger things together. But the seeds of it have all been rooted in season one, where we've seen them have to build trust together and and yield and all of that. So it's cool to see that they have everything they need to make this work. The question is, will they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and it all just goes back to their personalities and their strengths and their weaknesses, and part of the reason why they make such a good team is because they have such different like strengths and weaknesses. Obviously they're both great chefs, but like outside of that, they tackle things very differently, and they communicate differently, they handle things differently, and that's part of the reason why I think they work well together, is they kind of balance each other out in some regards. And we're seeing how those differences that can be a really good strength in a partnership can actually be a weakness too if they're not handled correctly. And what I really appreciate about this episode is Carmi's choice to stop working, go have fun, potentially open himself up to a new relationship. Like all of these things are good things that we would consider growth. And yet, the way that he does them is not great and screws over his partner and makes her feel alienated and isolated and disrespects her and all of those things. So it's such a human thing that I feel like we do, like when we're growing, like we're taking these positive steps, but we don't always take them in the best way. So we might be moving in the right direction, but we might be doing it in a way that might hurt other people too, but we're just not aware of it. So I loved that Carmi's choices, like he's not an all-out villain. He's not trying to be a jerk to her, but he's seeking something new, and he's trying something new and trying to fulfill a desire that he has without realizing how it's hurting potentially someone else that he's close to. And that's just something that he's going to have to figure out and learn, hopefully sooner rather than later, if
Yes.
he wants a restaurant.
Yes. No, I think that's a really great point that you make, which is that him blowing off Sydney in that scene is also him like stepping into this new area of growth for himself, which is like not to be a workaholic and have his entire life revolve around work, and maybe allow for someone new to come into his life that he cares about and that he wants to potentially build a life with, like allowing space for that. And yet, uh, he's new to it, so he's kind of like pendulum swinging the other direction and not honoring his commitments. And so he's figuring out what that right balance is between his personal life and finding meaning in things outside of work, but then also staying faithful to his work commitments and setting right expectations and all this kind of stuff. Like that growth phase for him often will look messy for us as human beings, and we're seeing it look a little messy and confusing for him too, as he's like walking this new thing out and figuring out where the place for this is that he's shut out for so much of his life. And so, we're all kind of like that. Like when we grow, we kind of swing a little bit too extreme to the other side, or we don't really know how to handle it, so we make a bunch of mistakes. And uh unfortunately, in this episode, Sydney's on the receiving end of it. But from Carmi's perspective, I'm like, this is a growth in a better direction for him than him staying in this headspace of work is my purpose and is the only thing that I have going on in my life that gives me meaning. So those two truths can happen at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think it also shows, like we know that Carmi is really creative in his work and in his creation of dishes and all of these things. But I also think in some ways he really struggles to think outside of the box, because the two options weren't help Sydney or like be with Sydney or help Claire. Like you had other options, you could have texted Sydney and said, "Hey, I'll meet you a little bit later. Something else came up." Or even telling Claire, "Hey, I can't help you right now, but I can help you later today." So it also shows this, like, when he's confronted with something that he might not be comfortable with, he struggles to think outside of the box, and he struggles to lean into that creativity that we do know that's in him. So I think, even though I hate that like Carmi blows off Sydney like this, and it's so rude and disrespectful that he did, I think it also shows a lot about who he is and how his brain works, rather than him being like, I don't know, like it's not a malicious thing that he did, but it's this like inability to like think outside of the box or like handle multiple things at one time, which I think is also a really fascinating character trait for Carmi.
Yes, he has a tendency to see things black and white and to be like, get basically have tunnel vision, which I think has helped him in some ways in his ability to commit and dive deeply into this craft and become the best at what he does. But you're right, there's less room for that balancing of many different things at the same time, because he's kind of lived his life in this, like, in all of the extremes. It's like, okay, I can't be with my brother and doing this Russian business. Let me go and be the best and just absolutely commit my entire life to this thing, years of my life to this. He's got a tendency for uh, extreme tunnel vision mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is probably helpful, but also very detrimental.
Yeah.
So, uh, more opportunities for growth, you know?
Yes. Yes, indeed. Um, okay, another little moment from Sid that I just absolutely loved is, once again, her ability to recognize people's superpowers and then want to grow and encourage and create opportunity for them is amazing. We saw her do this for Tina and kind of recognize the passion that Tina has and the talent that Tina has. And Sid is the one who's proposing to Carmi now to be able to send Marcus to go off and learn and refine his craft and his passion for creating desserts. So I just once again love how much Sydney is such a leader in her ability to multiply and nurture people's potential. And she is the one who that is thinking about that for Marcus. Like, Carmi isn't the one that didn't come to Carmi's mind that this was an option. Carmi's very open to it, which is amazing. And like, yes, this sounds like a great idea. Let's send him off to Copenhagen. But Sydney's the one that the idea originates in. And I think it's such a building on her ability to do that for Tina, and we're seeing her continue to do that for Marcus, which is just so cool. And it was one of my favorite little Sydney moments of this episode.
And what I really love about that is that at least twice in the first season, Marcus references Copenhagen and how he would love to go there. So it's even that higher
Oh,
degree of like, if he said it twice for the season for me to catch, that means that he's probably talking about Copenhagen quite a bit. And so
Mm.
for Sydney to want to pour into him professionally, but also know that this is a place where he wants to go to get that growth, I think just adds to that care that she shows for the people that are around her.
Mm. I didn't remember that little detail, but that's really really cool. And maybe even if he didn't mention it more times than that, the fact that she remembers those little details just shows her kind of thoughtfulness and care for the people around her and the things that they're excited about. That's so cool.
Yeah, that was one of the fun things about rewatching the first season is
Mm.
I knew that this was a topic that was coming up. So every time he said Copenhagen, I was like, oh, what?
Wow.
They started this all the way back here? And it was in,
Mm.
I think, 2 different episodes when Marcus talks about Copenhagen.
Wow. Yeah.
So, like, I don't know how far out they have this show
Mm.
planned, but they are definitely planting seeds that they are watering many episodes later.
That is so
So it's
cool.
very satisfying.
Yes, yes, they're playing the long game and they know that we're going to be here for the journey. We're going to be here to see the flowers grow and to harvest the crops, man.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we're ready.
So we also get another fabulous monologue opening scene with Carmi. I mean, this episode opens with that, and once again, I'm just like, Jeremy Allen White, just the man can act. He is so good, and the timing and pacing of his pauses as he's forming like the next sentence or the next phrase within a sentence, the ways that his eyebrows move to express what he's feeling or contemplating, the ways that he chooses to look away from the camera, and then the moments that he'll look into the camera directly and then look away quickly. It's just every detail is so good. And I just continually am impressed with his acting. And I think these types of scenes really allow his acting chops to shine when it's just close up, real up close and personal in his face as he is sharing something difficult or personal for him, which we know that is difficult for Carmi as a character. Oh, it's just so good.
And it's I don't know, I was so proud of him in that
Mm,
opening for sharing. I we obviously got that like big emotional share that he does in the end of season 1, but it's nice to see him continuing down that path. And I don't know, as a person who also struggles to identify and express emotions sometimes,
mm-hmm.
it's hard to
Yep.
continue to do that and to continue to be vulnerable, and the fact that he isn't shying away from it. Like he didn't do it once and like check it off the list, but he's continuing to go to the meetings, he's continuing to share, he's learning how to open up, he's learning how to be vulnerable. And I also love that he is aware that the way that he's been living his life is not the greatest. He doesn't know what fun is. He doesn't
Mm,
know how to have fun, and recognizes that that is an important part of life, experiencing joy and enjoyment and all of these things, amusement. And he's like, I don't know how to do that. But I'm just, I don't know, that opening, I was like, oh, I'm so proud of you, Carmi, for like
mm,
identifying these things and then being able to express them. That's huge.
yeah.
So it's great to see Carmi's continued growth, like not just as a leader, not just in the restaurant, but as a person, and the way that he is dedicated to working on himself for
Mm.
himself is really heartwarming.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we've been along this journey from season one up until now with him, with Sugar really pushing him and encouraging him to go and get help and grow in this way. And we get to see that growth happening in front of us. In that scene, I also just love that at the end, he kind of wraps up real quickly. He's like, okay, and yeah, so thanks for letting me share, y'all. Okay, like who's next? And that is so accurate in the way where you've like been pouring out your heart and then you realize you've been talking for a long time and you're like, and okay, let's just wrap this up quickly because that was a lot and I'm uncomfortable now. So moving on. And I just think that the way that he goes from like sharing something so deep and meaningful for him to like immediately jumping to, okay, that's all. Bye. Okay, I'm gonna get off the stage now. So good, so accurate. I can relate.
Oh no, 1,000%. Yeah. So just another example of this show's ability to understand human nature and
Mm-hmm.
then bring that to the screen in a way that just feels real.
Yep.
Is I don't know. It's the writing of this show is just top notch as always.
Yep. Okay. Any other thoughts about episode 3? Things that we should mention and talk about.
I find interesting the parallel between Tina and Ibra,
Mm,
and them both being sent to culinary school, and Tina sticking with it, doing the hard stuff, staying late, putting in the work, and then Ibra is struggling with it
yeah.
and walks away from it. And so I think that that's a really interesting choice, that they started on this path together and then they've taken two different paths. And so what is going to happen with each of these, and then what do these choices reveal about both of them? We don't see them a lot in this episode, but I love that even in this really Sydney focused episode, we still get to see what these two are doing and how their stories are progressing, because we are going to pick them up in a later episode. So I love that we got that little piece of information, little glimpse into their lives, and then we'll see more at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the show is such a tease, man. I'm like, oh, can we go down this path over here a little bit? Okay, no, okay, no, no, no. We're coming back. We're coming back. We're focused on Sydney. More shots of deliciousness. I ain't complaining about that, but also just it's such a great way the show continues to like just give us a little crumb to keep us coming back and keeping our curiosities just alive, active, thriving around some of these other storylines that we're not focusing on this in this episode, but we also have not forgotten either. So when it comes back again, we will have context and details and questions that hopefully will get answered. But yeah, the show is such a tease.
Yeah, yeah, it sure is. But hey, it keeps us coming back, so
Yeah,
it's effective.
I know it's in the best way, and I like that the show is smart enough to also not try and do like an equal amount of everyone's storylines in every episode. You know what I mean? Like there are some episodes that are definitely more a little bit more balanced, where we're kind of bouncing between our different crews. But I appreciate these episodes where we can really just sit with and spend time with one or two of our characters, and those other storylines are happening in the background, and we will go and visit them and focus and deep dive on them in the next one. But that kind of variation I think is really really good as well, because it makes us miss those characters. It makes us wonder what's going on with those characters while we're spending time with the other ones. And had we gotten kind of equal parts of each storyline, there's maybe less opportunity for us to be like, man, what is Ibra up to? What kind of headspace is he in? I want to know. I just want to sit with him over coffee and be like, okay, how are we feeling? How are we feeling? Things don't seem to be going great, but what might happen next with him? Will he overcome it? Will he not? Is he done with this? Just all those questions start to unfold, and that gap in time spent with them actually creates more excitement when we do get to spend time with them in the next episode. So the show's making us miss our characters, which is really really smart.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's doing a very good job at that. And then, like, one other thing that I think is worth acknowledging is that we spend this whole episode with Sydney as she's seeking inspiration, trying to create this dish. We see her image in her mind of what this dish is going to be, and then she goes to actually create it, and it's not good, and
Yeah.
she spits it out. And I also love that. It would have been so like warm and fuzzy if she had created the dish and it was amazing, and she succeeded and it was a great day. um, but I think that this is more true to life, that she had all this inspiration, she was trying to make it work, she has a great end goal in mind, and yet it still didn't come together. And so she has to keep working. She has to keep going down this path. And I think that is, I like that ending better because it feels more realistic than the happily ever after version of this dish.
Yes, totally agreed. Totally agreed. And that's the creative process too. Honestly, any endeavor, it's like you get really excited and you have this grand vision of how it's going to come together. And usually the first time and even the like next 50 times, it probably might suck for a while. And so the question then is, how much will you continue to be persistent and committed and faithful to your dream, your vision, you know? And I love that healthy dose of reality that the show gives us. And you see her feel discouraged too. You see her frustrated at the end of this episode. And from a pacing perspective, episode 3 is the right time for like things to not be going swimmingly because then we've got this runway of time for things to get better and then for it to go wrong again and then for it to hopefully get better or whatnot by the end. But it's the valleys in the overall arcs of for all of these characters and even for this whole crew opening this restaurant that will then make those wins feel really, really satisfying when they happen. So you're right. I love the healthy dose of reality the show is willing to dole out and serve up to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we love it. It makes things more interesting.
Yep. I have a little shout out for Sydney's little hood/hat situation. I have never seen one of those, but every time she had that on, I was like, that is actually genius, you know? Because if you're wearing a winter hat, your neck might be cold, but then also it's really annoying to have a hood hanging off the back of your coat sometimes. I hate it. I hate wearing hoodies because it just feels like it's pulling everything back. So she's got a whole contraption, and I thought that was genius. She's already a genius character, but Homegirl's investing in a hood hat, and I want one.
Honestly, I'm sure you can Google what those
Never
are
seen them.
and get you one.
Have you seen those before?
I'm sure they
Out and about? I have not.
No, but I am a hoodie person, so like I don't have a problem
Yes.
with that.
Yes.
But I wish you luck in your endeavors to get a hood hat. I hope that you're able to fulfill that dream in your heart.
That dream. Indeed. I may fail in the beginning, but the persistence carried me through.
I mean, the good thing is this season came out last year, so there's already been like a year of people Googling to try and find this.
That's
so
right.
I think you're on this search at the right time.
Yes. The people have done the work for me. I just need to click buy. Yes.
Yes.
Very good.
That's it. Perfect.
All right, let's give out some awards, shall we? The award for Top Chef is our first category. Who is this one going to?
I got to give it to Sid. You know, she went on this marathon eating session all over Chicago, and that is quite an accomplishment to do all of that and to not puke. Like, that's an accomplishment. She eats so much food in this episode.
Oh my gosh.
How is she still standing at the end? I don't know. But she did it.
She's also like she's a tiny human, like the stomach. Right? Yes. All right. Yeah,
wild.
It's a good choice. I'm giving this award to Sid for just her grit and her faithfulness. I'm so impressed by it because I know how discouraging that can be. And when people don't show up for the things that you were running in the same direction for, it's easy to get discouraged. And she's like, no, I'm going to do this. And she doesn't like just go to a couple places and then call it good and like check that box. No, she fully commits herself to it. And I just love it. She's doing it on her own and she don't need anybody else to come with her. And so I love that for her.
Yes, go Sid. Mm-hmm. We are all rooting for her.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, Achievement in Chaos. What's getting this award this week?
Yeah, I'm giving it to Carmi for blowing off his business partner and texting her an hour later that he was blowing her off. Are you kidding me? Right. You chaotic hobgoblin. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, not great. That's one of my pet peeves. So I was like, Carmina, you're getting deduction points in my book, but
Right?
growth. So
I'm
I can't be
so
too mad about it.
conflicted. I
I
am
know.
so angry at him this whole episode.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but also, like, in isolation, this would be a sign of growth.
Yes. But it's
But
freaking his
just
dad.
text her back. Like, don't
Right.
wait an hour.
Right. Or at least right after you know you can't make it, be like, hey, I'm so sorry something came up. I gotta
Yeah.
help someone deal with whatever. Not
Carmy.
great. Not great, Carmi.
Not great.
Yes. Achievement in Chaos, I'm giving this award to the green sauce Jackson Pollock. I was so stressed looking at that. Just sauces everywhere in Sydney's brain. I'm sure it's going to be beautiful at the end. It's creative, messy
That's
creative process.
amazing. Oh, I loved it. I was like, yes, this looks great to me. I'm happy that I wasn't there in person because if I was there in person, that would stress me out. But staring at it on a screen, I'm like, yes, this is abstract and beautiful and
Mhm.
lovely.
Yes,
Yeah, that's a great choice though. That is chaotic saucing for sure.
it is. It is. Okay, spiciest line. Who is getting this award and for what line that they doled out?
I'm going to give this to Sydney for just reacting to Carmi's text message. That's it.
Yes,
He just gets a reaction. He doesn't get
that's
words.
so good. Yeah, not even like a, it's okay, no worries, or no, nope, nothing, nothing at all.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm giving this award to Richie. This is for all the Swifties out there when he says, and Eva, I love Taylor
Mm-hmm.
Swift too. I just needed a break, you know? Oh, that was so
Yeah, that was another one of my options. I
yeah,
loved that line.
it was really endearing. The whole little Richie moment with his daughter is just really sweet and comes off a whole development for this character of him figuring out his purpose, his meaning, which is really adorable. And it's a very chaotic previous episode for him as well. And it's like, a nice, quiet, peaceful moment for you, Richie. This is what you need. This is what you
Mhm.
need.
Yes, it's also what we needed.
Yes.
Like, there was so much Richie chaos in the last episode. We need calm, endearing Richie in
Yeah.
this episode, and that's what the show gave us.
Mm-hmm. All right, looking ahead, what are you stoked for as the next few episodes unfold?
Yeah, I'm excited for where we're going next. There's some
Okay.
fun adventures, some really good character moments that are coming up. So
Hi.
there are a couple of things that I'm like specifically looking forward to that's going to happen in the next couple of episodes. So uh, much to look forward to as we continue to race towards this restaurant opening.
Okay, that was a great trailer. I'm intrigued. Top of my list is I want to meet up back with Tina and Ibra, our crew,
Hmm.
the gang.
Yeah.
I just want to know how are we doing? What's going on? What's the latest? So I hope we get an episode that's just centered around those two. I think they're just also such fun foils with each other. So it's just good fun when we're with them. But also, I'm just so invested in them getting this opportunity to grow and what they do with this, and what choices they make with it. So I'm excited to meet back up with them. And I would love to see Marcus frolic off to Copenhagen and be able to make his donuts all day, every day in a beautiful place. And also, I think there's some things that might play out with him and his family. I don't know. I just keep thinking back to the opening of this whole season. And my gosh, that's got to be significant somehow. So I am like just that's the equivalent of the envelope so far for me for the season. I'm just waiting to see how that's going to be something at some point. So those are my two big ones. And then for the cliffhanger that we got at the end of the previous episode with Carmen and Claire, I kind of love that this whole episode was kind of a head fake. Like we don't really actually get to see them interact at all. And so I wonder how that will be when they finally get to move whatever thing that they needed to move, some heavy object, whatever. So those are my 3 things. All right. Well, we shall find out in the upcoming next few episodes, and it sounds like there's some juicy things that are to come. So this is our review and discussion of episode 3. You can find it available, as always, to stream on Hulu. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. Everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we continued our journey through The Bear Season 2. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about episode 3. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at tvnspod, or you can email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back very soon with episode 4. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again very soon.